The night was cold in the small town of Willow Creek, but Emma White's hands were warm, almost burning, as she scrolled through her phone. The light from the screen glowed against her pale face, highlighting her nervous eyes. She wasn't nervous because of danger. She was nervous because of something far stranger. Her life was about to take a turn she never expected, and it was all because of one simple lie. Emma wasn't rich. Not even close. Her father was a mechanic who spent long hours under rusty cars, and her mother worked double shifts as a waitress in a small diner on Main Street. Their house was old, the paint peeling from the wooden walls, the roof leaking every time it rained. Emma's shoes had holes at the bottom, and sometimes she pretended not to notice when her stomach growled at night because dinner had been smaller than it should have been. But at school, nobody could ever know. In Willow Creek High School, money was everything. The rich kids ruled the hallways, wearing designer jackets, shining shoes, and carrying the latest phones. They weren't cruel on purpose, but their laughter, their jokes, their parties all reminded Emma of what she didn't have. And she was tired of being invisible. It started one Friday afternoon in the cafeteria. Emma was sitting alone at a table, stirring her soup without touching it. Across the room, the girls she admired, Sophie Miller, Anna Clarkson, and Rachel Summers, were laughing loudly, their bracelets jingling, their perfect nails tapping against their iPhones. Sophie turned, her blue eyes scanning the room, and for a moment they landed on Emma. Then she smirked, whispered something to Anna, and they all burst into giggles. Emma's cheeks burned. She wanted to disappear, crawl under the table, anything. But then, Sophie stood up, holding her tray, and walked directly toward Emma's table. Emma froze. Well, Sophie said, her voice smooth but sharp. You're Emma, right? I don't think we've ever really talked. Emma nodded, her throat dry. Sophie tilted her head. So, tell me, what does your family do? I've never seen your parents at the country club. The country club. The place where the rich families gathered every weekend. Emma had walked past it before, peeking through the gates, but she had never stepped inside. And in that single moment, with Sophie's eyes on her, Emma made a decision that would change everything. She smiled faintly and said, "Oh, we don't go there much. My family usually spends summers in Europe, so you know." Silence. Then Sophie's eyebrows rose in surprise. Anna and Rachel, who had followed, gasped a little. "Europe?" Anna asked, eyes wide. "Paris, mostly," Emma added quickly, her heart pounding in her chest. "My dad has some business partners there." It was a lie. A complete lie. Her father had never left Willow Creek, except maybe once to attend a mechanics conference in the next state. But the words spilled out easily, almost naturally. Sophie's expression softened into something Emma had never seen before: respect. "Wow," Sophie said slowly. "I didn't know you were like that." And just like that, Emma wasn't invisible anymore. The following days were a blur. Sophie invited her to sit with them at lunch. Rachel complimented her style, though Emma's jeans were thrifted. Anna asked if she wanted to come to a party that weekend. Emma felt like she was floating, caught in a dream she didn't want to wake from. But every step deeper into this dream was another step further into the web of lies she was weaving. She began borrowing her mother's old pearl earrings and claiming they were gifts from her father's business partners in Italy. She started carrying a second-hand designer handbag she had found in a thrift shop, telling everyone it was last season's Gucci. She memorized names of expensive places from magazines: Monaco, Milan, Santorini, and sprinkled them into conversations as if they were part of her life. And the more she lied, the more the girls believed. Emma started getting invited to parties she had only ever heard about. She found herself standing in living rooms with marble floors, drinking sodas from crystal glasses, laughing as if she belonged. And for the first time, when people looked at her, they didn't see the poor mechanic's daughter. They saw someone special, someone rich. But every night, when she went home, reality slapped her across the face. She would step into the small, dimly lit kitchen where her mother was scrubbing dishes and her father was asleep in his chair from exhaustion. She would see the cracks in the walls, the bills piled on the counter, the single flickering light bulb above the sink. and she would feel guilty. But guilt wasn't as strong as the feeling of being wanted. One Saturday, Emma found herself in Sophie's massive bedroom, walls painted soft pink, shelves lined with designer bags, a chandelier hanging from the ceiling. Sophie was lying on the bed, scrolling through her phone. "Emma," Sophie said suddenly, "we're planning a trip next month. Just us girls. My dad's jet will take us to New York for a week. You're coming, right?" Emma froze. A jet? A trip? Her mind raced. She couldn't afford a bus ticket, let alone a trip to New York. But Sophie's eyes were expectant, Anna's were wide with excitement, and Rachel was already squealing about the shopping they'd do. Emma smiled weakly and said, "Of course. I wouldn't miss it." The lie slipped out so easily. But deep inside, she knew this was the beginning of something dangerous. Because sooner or later, the truth always finds a way to the surface. And when it did, Emma's world would come crashing down. The invitation to New York haunted Emma from the moment she stepped out of Sophie's mansion that night. The air outside was cool, the streetlights glowing faintly on the quiet road, but Emma's chest felt heavy, like a stone pressed against her heart. "New York," she whispered to herself as she walked home. The words sounded magical, glamorous, like something out of a movie. But to Emma, it also sounded terrifying. How was she supposed to join a trip that cost more than her family's yearly rent? When she opened the door to her small house, the contrast nearly broke her. The living room smelled faintly of motor oil from her father's clothes, and the floor creaked under her shoes. Her mother was sitting at the table, sorting through bills under the dim yellow light of the old lamp. "You're late," her mother said softly, not in anger, but in concern. "Did you eat at Sophie's house?" Emma nodded quickly. "Yes, Mom." Her mother gave her a tired smile. "That's good. Saves us one plate of food tonight." Emma's heart twisted. She wanted to tell her mother everything, the lies, the invitation, the way she was living a life that didn't belong to her. But the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she mumbled, "I'm going to bed." That night, lying on her thin mattress, Emma stared at the cracked ceiling and tried to think of a way out. But every solution ended the same way: her friends would find out the truth. And Emma couldn't let that happen. The following week, Emma became more entangled in the lies. Sophie and the others wanted detailed stories about her so-called trips to Europe, what Paris was like in the spring, what kind of food she ate in Italy. Emma spent hours on her phone, researching online, memorizing facts she had never lived. At lunch one day, Rachel leaned closer, eyes sparkling with curiosity. "So, Emma, tell us, what's the best restaurant in Paris? I'm dying to go when my parents take me next summer." Emma's mind raced. She had never even tasted French food, except maybe a croissant from the local bakery. But she smiled and said, "Oh, there's this little place near the Eiffel Tower. Very private, only the rich locals know about it. They serve the best escargot, snails." Rachel's face lit up in awe. "Snails? Wow. That sounds so fancy." Sophie nodded approvingly. "I knew you had good taste." Inside, Emma's stomach churned. She had spent half the night learning about escargot just to say those words. The lies were piling higher and higher, and she was standing on top of them, afraid that if she slipped, the whole mountain would come crashing down. One Friday evening, Sophie invited Emma to a sleepover. Emma almost refused. She didn't want Sophie to see her old pajamas with holes in them, or her worn-out toothbrush that barely had bristles left. But Sophie was insistent. "You have to come," Sophie said. "It's tradition. Only my closest friends get invited. And you're one of us now." Emma's heart swelled. "Okay," she whispered. The night of the sleepover, Emma stuffed her bag with her cleanest clothes. She borrowed her mother's pearl earrings again and wore her thrifted Gucci handbag proudly. When she arrived, Sophie's house sparkled like a palace. The girls lounged in silk pajamas, sipping sodas and talking about vacations, shopping, and designer clothes. "Emma," Sophie said suddenly, "you have to tell us about your summer in Santorini. Didn't you say your family had a villa there?" Emma froze. She had mentioned Santorini once, just to impress them, but she hadn't prepared for details. Her palms grew sweaty as the girls leaned in, waiting. She forced a smile. Yes. It was breathtaking. The sunsets were like fire in the sky. And the water so blue. You'd think it was painted. The girls gasped in admiration. Rachel clapped her hands. That sounds magical. Emma exhaled, relieved. For now, the lie held. But the cracks began to show. At school, Sophie offered to drive Emma home one day. Emma panicked. She couldn't let Sophie see her real house. Thinking quickly, she pointed at a large white mansion on the corner of Oak Street. That's my place, Emma lied, her voice shaking slightly. Sophie's eyes widened. Wow. It's beautiful. Emma smiled weakly. Yeah. My parents just had it remodeled. As Sophie drove away, Emma's stomach twisted into knots. The mansion belonged to Mr. and Mrs. Collins, one of the wealthiest families in town. What if Sophie found out? That night, Emma couldn't eat dinner. She sat staring at her plate while her parents chatted about bills and car repairs. You okay, honey? Her father asked. Emma forced a smile. I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. The walls of her lie were closing in, and there was no escape. The pressure only grew when Sophie's mother invited Emma to dinner. The invitation felt like a dagger, polite, sweet, but deadly. Emma couldn't refuse without raising suspicion. That Saturday, she put on her best dress, the one her mother had bought from a clearance rack 2 years ago. She styled her hair carefully, borrowed her mom's lipstick, and prayed no one would notice the frayed hem at the bottom of her dress. Sophie's mother was graceful, elegant, with diamonds that sparkled under the chandelier. The table was set with silver cutlery and fine china. Emma sat stiffly, terrified she would make a mistake. So, Emma, Sophie's mother said with a polite smile, your father is in business, isn't he? Real estate, if I recall. Emma's throat went dry. Sophie must have told her mother something Emma had once invented. She nodded quickly. Yes. He works internationally. Very busy. Sophie's mother seemed satisfied. But Emma's stomach churned so badly she could barely swallow her food. When she got home that night, she collapsed on her bed, trembling. The lies weren't just words anymore. They were threads tangled around her, pulling tighter and tighter. And then came the moment that changed everything. One afternoon, as Emma walked down Main Street, Sophie spotted her from across the road. Emma froze. She was carrying a bag of groceries with her mother, their old coats zipped up against the wind. The car they stood beside wasn't sleek or shiny, it was her father's old rusted pickup truck. Sophie's eyes narrowed. She waved, crossing the street quickly. Emma, what are you doing here? Emma's heart stopped. She looked at her mother, whose eyes were confused, then back at Sophie. The truth hovered in the air like a storm waiting to break. Emma forced a laugh. Oh, just helping one of our workers. This isn't our car. And this is our maid. Her mother froze, her face falling in shock. Sophie looked surprised, but before she could ask questions, Emma pulled her mother away. That night, her mother confronted her in tears. Emma, why would you call me your maid? Why are you lying like this? Emma broke down, sobbing. Because I don't want to be invisible anymore, Mom. They only notice me when I pretend. They only care when I'm rich. Her mother hugged her tightly, but her words were heavy. Lies don't last, Emma. They never do. Emma wiped her tears, but deep down she knew her mother was right. Yet the next morning, when Sophie texted her about the New York trip, Emma replied, Of course. I'll be there. Because the truth might destroy her. But the lie was already killing her. The autumn wind blew through Willow Creek, rattling the trees and scattering golden leaves across the sidewalks. Emma walked to school with her hands buried deep in the pockets of her thin jacket. She had folded the sleeves just so, hoping no one would notice the worn edges. Today was important. Sophie had told her last night there would be something special after school. Emma didn't know what it was, but the tone in Sophie's voice made it sound big. At school, Emma forced herself to smile and hold her head high. She joined Sophie, Rachel, and Anna at their usual table. Sophie's father had just bought her a new sports car, and everyone was buzzing about it. Emma, Sophie said suddenly, turning those sharp blue eyes on her. What car does your dad drive again? Emma's stomach tightened. She remembered her father's old pickup truck with its rusty doors and cracked windows. But she couldn't say that. Oh, she said with a casual shrug. Dad doesn't really drive his car much. He prefers the Mercedes he keeps at the summer house. Rachel gasped. A summer house? Yes, Emma said quickly. By the lake. It's quiet there. We usually spend weekends sailing. The girl's eyes sparkled with admiration. Emma's chest tightened. It felt good, too good. But it was another lie stacked on the mountain of lies already threatening to bury her alive. That afternoon, Sophie grabbed her hand as they left school. Come with us. My dad's driver is picking us up. We're going somewhere fun. Emma hesitated. She usually avoided situations that could expose her. But Sophie didn't wait for her answer. The black car pulled up, shining under the sunlight, and the girls hopped in. Emma followed, her heart racing. The car drove them to Willow Creek's most expensive mall, a place Emma had only visited once when her mother dragged her into window shop. Sophie led the way, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Let's shop, Sophie said with a grin. Emma, you need something new. That jacket is cute, but you know. Emma's cheeks burned. Her jacket was thrifted for $5. But she laughed lightly, as if she understood. Inside the boutique, Sophie handed her a sleek dress. Try this. It would look stunning on you. Emma slipped into the changing room and stared at herself in the mirror. The dress clung to her body, the fabric smooth and expensive. For a moment, she felt like the girl she pretended to be. But then she glanced at the price tag, $600. Her stomach dropped. Emma, come out. Sophie called. Emma stepped out, forcing a smile. The girls gasped. You look amazing, Anna said. You have to get it, Rachel added. Emma's throat was dry. She couldn't afford a fraction of the dress. Her hands shook as she returned to the changing room. When she came back out, she laughed and said, I'll get it later. I don't like carrying cash while shopping. My dad usually sends his assistant for things like this. Sophie nodded, satisfied. Makes sense. But Emma caught Rachel glancing at her strangely, as if something didn't quite add up. The cracks were forming. That night, at home, Emma sat on her bed with her phone buzzing in her hands. Sophie had posted a picture of all of them at the boutique, tagging Emma. Her classmates were commenting. Emma, you look so rich. Wow, I didn't know you had that kind of money. When are you inviting us to your lake house? Emma's chest tightened. The more she lied, the harder it became to stop. Each comment was a chain binding her to the life she was pretending to live. Her mother knocked softly and entered with folded laundry. You're quiet tonight, she said, placing Emma's worn clothes on the chair. Emma nodded quickly, hiding her phone. She didn't want her mother to see the comments. I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. Because deep down, she knew the truth had a way of slipping through. Even the smallest crack could shatter everything. And that crack was already forming. The day of Sophie's birthday arrived, and the whole town seemed to know about it. Sophie Miller never did anything small. Her parties were legendary. This year, she had rented the Grand Hall at Willow Creek Country Club. There would be a live band, catered food, and guests from families Emma had only read about in magazines. Emma stood in front of her mirror at home, her hands trembling. She wore her mother's old black dress, the one saved for church on Easter Sunday. Emma had stitched it herself the night before, adding a little shine with beads she'd borrowed from a craft store. It wasn't designer, but in the dim lights of the country club, maybe no one would notice. Her father peeked into her room. His face was tired, stained with grease from another long day at the garage. You look beautiful, kiddo, he said softly. But are you sure you belong at a place like that? Emma's heart tightened. She hated that question. Belong. She wanted so badly to belong. Of course, she whispered. They're my friends. But as she climbed into Sophie's sleek car later that night, Emma felt her stomach twist. The country club was glowing, chandeliers spilling golden light across marble floors. Guests in elegant gowns and sharp suits laughed as waiters passed trays of sparkling drinks. Emma followed Sophie and the others, her heart pounding. Emma, Sophie said loudly, pulling her forward. Everyone, this is Emma White. Her family spends summers in Europe. Heads turned. Smiles spread. Someone muttered, "Oh, the Whites, yes, I've heard of them." Emma forced a smile, though her hands were shaking. The night went on. The girls danced, laughed, and posed for pictures. Emma laughed too, but every laugh felt heavier. Every glance made her feel as if someone could see through her. Then it happened. While Emma was near the buffet table, Rachel leaned in close. Her voice was low, careful. "Emma, where is your summer house again? You said by the lake, right?" "Yes," Emma said quickly, her chest tightening. "It's a bit outside town." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "Strange. My uncle owns property there. He says there aren't any new houses." Emma's breath caught. Her hands went cold. "Oh," she said, trying to sound casual, "it's very private. Not many people know about it." Rachel stared at her for a long moment, then smiled, but it wasn't the same warm smile as before. It was sharp, suspicious. Emma hurried away, her throat burning. The music was loud, but all she could hear was the pounding of her own heart. Later that night, Sophie announced a game, Truth or Dare. The group cheered, circling around on the plush carpet of the lounge area. When it was Emma's turn, Rachel's eyes glittered. "Truth," she said slyly. "Emma, what does your dad actually do?" The air grew thick. Sophie and Anna turned, waiting. Everyone's eyes were on Emma. Her father's oil-stained hands flashed in her memory. The old garage, the broken cars, the smell of gasoline. Emma forced a laugh. "He's in business. He owns multiple things. I don't really keep track." Rachel raised her brows. "Oh, interesting. Because my cousin swears he saw your dad fixing cars at the corner garage last week." Silence fell. Emma froze. The room felt hot. Sophie looked confused. Anna frowned. Rachel's lips curled into the smallest smile. "Maybe your cousin is mistaken," Emma whispered, her voice shaking. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted. For the rest of the night, whispers followed Emma. Eyes studied her too closely. Smiles felt forced. When she finally got home, she ripped off the beaded dress and collapsed on her bed, tears streaming down her face. She wanted this dream so badly to be seen, to be admired, to belong. But the walls of lies she had built were starting to crumble. And she knew, deep down, that one more push could bring everything crashing down. The following Monday, the halls of Willow Creek High School felt colder than ever. Emma walked slowly, clutching her books to her chest. Laughter floated from groups of students, but it didn't sound the same as before. This time, the laughter wasn't distant, it felt directed at her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She hesitated before pulling it out. A new post was spreading across the school's social media page. A picture of her father, wearing his greasy overalls, standing outside the small garage on Main Street. The caption read, "Emma White's rich dad and his business." Her stomach dropped. The comments beneath the photo burned into her eyes. So she lied? Wow, pretending to be rich. That's sad. I knew something was off. Her hands trembled so badly, she almost dropped the phone. She wanted to run, to hide, to disappear. By lunchtime, the whispers were everywhere. Students stared as she passed. Sophie sat at their usual table, but when Emma approached, Rachel leaned in and said something. Sophie's smile vanished. Anna looked away. Emma stopped, frozen. "Can I sit?" she asked weakly. Rachel folded her arms. "Why don't you tell us the truth first? About your summer house. About Paris. About everything." The entire table went quiet. Emma's throat tightened. Her legs felt weak. She could have lied again, spun another story, blamed it on a misunderstanding. But something inside her broke. She was exhausted, tired of pretending, tired of carrying a life that wasn't hers. She lowered her eyes and whispered, "I don't have a summer house. I've never been to Paris. My dad, he's a mechanic. My mom works at the diner. We don't have money. I just wanted to fit in." Silence. Then Rachel smirked, triumphant. I knew it. Sophie's face softened, but she didn't say anything. Anna shifted uncomfortably, staring at her food. Emma's chest ached. She stood there, trembling, then turned and walked away, her eyes stinging with tears. She spent the rest of the day hiding in the library, curled up between the shelves. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't pretending. She was just Emma, poor, plain, invisible Emma. That night, she sat at the kitchen table while her parents talked quietly in the next room. She heard her father's voice, tired but firm. She's chasing something that isn't real. I just want her to know she's enough. Her mother replied softly, she's hurting. We have to remind her she's loved. Tears slid down Emma's cheeks. She had been so desperate for strangers' approval that she forgot the love she already had. The next morning, she walked into school with no makeup, no borrowed jewelry, no fake stories. Just herself. Heads turned. Whispers rose. But Emma held her chin higher this time. At lunch, she sat alone again, until a quiet voice spoke. Hey, can I sit? Emma looked up. It was Claire, a shy girl from her math class. She wasn't rich, wasn't popular, but her smile was kind. Emma blinked back tears and nodded. For the first time in weeks, her smile was real. She had lost the glamorous life she built from lies, but she had gained something more important herself. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Because the truth, even when painful, was lighter to carry than any lie.